Shakespeare's Sister, composed by Virginia Woolf, one of the most significant novelists as well as an essayist. Virginia Woolf is believed to be a feminist writer. To the Lighthouse is considered to be her masterpiece. Virginia Woolf was born in 1882 and she died in 1941. In fact, in 1941, she committed suicide. Though she attempted to commit suicide earlier in her childhood period, but finally, in her childhood period, she had not actually committed suicide. She lost her parents during her childhood and she was brought up by her half-sister. Even her half-sister also died, and therefore Virginia Woolf led a very frustrating life, a life of despair and despondency. In youthful days, Virginia Woolf was married to Leonard Woolf. Virginia Woolf had talked about the condition of the women during the Elizabethan period. Elizabethan period is considered to be a very much productive period in terms of the contribution in literature. In Shakespeare's Sister, Virginia Woolf focused on that period, that is the Elizabethan period, which is regarded as the golden period in the history of English literature. But the question is, why do we not find the contribution of the female writers during the Elizabethan period? That is the reflection of Virginia Woolf in this essay. Shakespeare's Sister is also regarded as an essay within another essay. The main essay from where this essay has been taken is the essay titled as A Room of One's Own. And from that essay, A Room of One's Own, this Shakespeare's Sister has been, taken. In the Shakespeare's Sister, Virginia Woolf focused on the life, on the condition of the women during the Elizabethan period. In the Elizabethan period, women were very much subservient to the men. In fact, the women had to lead a very miserable life under a male-dominated society. The women didn't have any scope of getting education. Women were not sent to the educational institution, and the women were forced to marry during early childhood. Some marriage happened even in the cradle, and some marriages happened during the childhood period of the women. Women had to marry a person of the liking of her father. Women didn't have any scope of selecting her own husband. Women were also beaten if she didn't obey the order of her parents to marry a person whom the women may dislike. And women didn't have any scope of solvency. They didn't have any scope of earning money. They didn't have any independence, freedom. They didn't have any privacy. They didn't have the room of their own. And as they didn't have any education, they didn't have any financial solvency, they didn't have any economic independence, they didn't have any privacy. So in that perspective, it is really very much impossible for the women to come out to contribute as writer. And the profession of creativity for the women was not very much liked in the male-dominated society. And if a woman had to lead a life of her disliking, in the husband's house, then it is really impossible for any woman to provide or produce creativity. And the women got position or space in literature during that time, but women didn't have any scope or position in history. In history, women were totally absent. In literature, women were given priority. In the literature of Shakespeare, Lady Macbeth or Cleopatra, Portia, Calpurnia are definitely very much extraordinary characters. But in history, there is no character like that during the Elizabethan period. In this way, the women's got a very lower position in that society where they didn't have any profession, they didn't have any education, they didn't have any social communication, they didn't have any independence. So in that perspective, it is really not possible for any women to produce any sort of creativity. And the women, had to face a lot of barriers in their life. And in that life, it is really very much unlikely to get any sort of literary creations from them. Because if anyone would like to produce any sort of creativity, he or she should have the social communication. She should have to take plots from different sources. But women didn't have any scope of getting plots or getting sources of writing from anywhere. So because they had to lead a very private life where there was no scope of experiences. So these were really the barriers for the women. And the women were not like if they showed any sort of creative genius, because the male dominated society didn't like any creative women to come out in their life. Here Virginia Woolf had also created an imaginary character. That imaginary character is also found in the title of the essay, Shakespeare's sister. In fact, there was none like Shakespeare's sister as is imagined in this essay. And that Shakespeare's sister is Judith Shakespeare. Judith Shakespeare is an imaginary character. It is reflected here, it is presented here that Judith Shakespeare was the apple of her father's eye. Still, Judith Shakespeare didn't get any opportunity to go to the educational institution like her brother. And Judith Shakespeare had to get all sorts of educations inside the house from her brother's book. And Judith Shakespeare had the creative genius, but still that creative genius could not be reflected by Judith Shakespeare, as it was not, very much inspiring for the women to show their creativity. Judith Shakespeare had to marry the husband liked by her father at the age of 70. And, Judith Shakespeare had to flee. If there was a character like Judith Shakespeare had to flee from Stratford to London, as Shakespeare had done. Shakespeare, traveled or migrated from Stratford to London. And after coming to London, Shakespeare had taken the position in a theatre. There, Shakespeare worked under the theatre owner, and after facing a lot of troubles, after overcoming all the ups and downs, Shakespeare became the owner of the theatre house or of the theatre company. But if Judith Shakespeare would like to do just like her brother, migrated from Stratford to London, then what would have happened in case of Judith Shakespeare? Judith Shakespeare came to try her profession as an actress, and she was initially not liked by the theater company to be selected as an actress. But after getting selection from the theater manager or the owner of the theater because of her beauty, then the theater manager would have taken the scope of getting involved with Judy Shakespeare, and after that, the theater manager seduced Judy Shakespeare, and because of that seduction, because of that unhappy event in the life of Judy Shakespeare committed suicide. And so, two things happened in case of two persons. One thing happened in case of William Shakespeare as he was a male, but another thing happened in case of Judy Shakespeare as she was a female. Because in the male-dominated society, the female or the women didn't have the scope very much smooth to flourish in the desirable professions. Many critics or many persons may think that there was no female character who could be like William Shakespeare during the Elizabethan period. But the answer of Virginia Woolf is that, was there any male character in the Elizabethan period who could become a good match like William Shakespeare? William Shakespeare is totally a different individual. There was no other person, even from the male community, to be like William Shakespeare. But it could happen that if the society could be supportive, if the society could think the women to be creative, if the society could give the support to the women, if the society did not discriminate in case of the female, then the female who had the creativity could be the influential character in terms of literary genius. But because of the unfavorable conditions prevalent in the male-dominated society, the women with the creative genius could be the unhappiest person in that particular society, because this creative genius could not show their creativity, and therefore those women who had the creative genius could be more unhappy persons in the society. So in this way, Virginia Woolf had analyzed the conditions of the women in a particular society which was totally male dominated and which was not very much supportive to the creative women. So this is the main focus of this essay. I hope that you could understand what Virginia Woolf has reflected in this particular essay. Thanks to all of you for your patient hearing.